Welcome back to Swiss Watch Expo. I'm Richard.
I'm Jonathan.
And as promised, 5 weeks in, here we are doing another debate piece, except this time we're not going to be debating pieces. We're going to be debating brands. We're going to tell you all about it. So there's a lot of names in the Swiss world, a lot of names in the watches world, but two of the ones you might know the most would be Rolex and Omega. So those are the two we're going to compare today. I saw somewhere that when surveying people, 100% of people know Rolex as a brand, and 77% of people know Omega.
I already win.
Well, no, you can't. No, you can't start out like that. No, there's so many more things to go over.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, so two of the bigger names, right? Yeah. Two of the bigger names. In terms of production, Rolex is number one in mass produced, and then Omega is right behind them.
Another point to me.
Hey, wait, I'm just saying. So that's why we're comparing them. A lot of people will compare the two of them together. So that's why we decided to go with them. So we wanted to start with sort of like the historical significance of the pieces and kind of compare and contrast the two of them. What about yours? What about with Rolex? What is some of the pivotal historical things that have happened with Rolex?
Well, it was founded originally by one guy.
True. Hans Wardorf.
Yeah. They've had a pretty consistent stellar history throughout history of, just not even ingenuity, but, showing what they're worth and actual usage of the watches.
Right. I agree with that.
What about Omega?
Well, it's been around since 1834-ish or so. That's kind of where the brand started. It became Omega Company in around 1903, the same year that car was kind of invented. So
Rolex was founded much later than that.
So it's been around for a long time. So I would say historically significant in terms of the amount of time it's been around. In terms of historical significance, it has so many. Obviously, we've got the moon watch. Everybody's heard about that, so I won't beat a dead horse. But then there's also the first watch to ever go to the North Pole, the South Pole, space, the atmosphere, so to speak. And then, of course, Omega is now the official timekeeper of the Olympics since 1962 and has been that way indefinitely forever, basically, since then. So historically significant, I think Omega kind of wins that.
My brand did make the first waterproof case, swam the English Channel, flew over Everest, climbed Everest, created the first 300-mile-an-hour watch. What else? Was worn by many, many actors.
True.
Throughout history, including James Bond.
Yeah, that's true. But so is this one?
Sean Connery was in the first movie, I believe it's Dr. No, or a Rolex Omega.
That's true. But what does he wear now? What does the new James Bond wear?
Well, it doesn't matter what the new James Bond wears.
He wears an Omega.
It doesn't matter what the
He wears an Omega. Yeah, that's right.
We're going through history. We're not jumping history.
Okay, what about, let's go to technology. What do we think about the technology on either one of these brands?
Well, I think you should take the lead on this, and I'll do my rebuttal.
You want me to start?
Yeah.
I'm a hard act to follow with this one.
Okay.
All right.
Let's go.
Well, of course, nowadays, both of them have been significant when it comes to technology and building new things. Of course, Rolex has the Oyster case. Omega has a great deal of innovations. Of course, the one that's probably most noted is the coaxial escapement. Now, granted, they did buy this from someone else and they patented it in their own pieces, but now they're implementing it in pretty much everything they make. In terms of technology, Omega has now purchased, of course, in this case, it's a third-party organization, but the MATAS certification. So every one of their pieces, anyone that has that certification along with it meets the most stringent, I would say, parameters within the industry by far. And so the technology they've been able to put into these watches in order to meet those stringent parameters is just outstanding. And of course, you got low friction movement with the coaxial escapement. And of course, now each one of these pieces, by certification standard, if it is a METAS certified master chronometer, it is able to resist up to 15,000 Gauss of magnetism. Of course, that's probably that is the biggest enemy of mechanical pieces. And so they've managed to completely beat that altogether. Also has to meet the standard of 0 to plus 5 seconds a day and be water resistant, of course, up to a certain rating as well. So in terms of technology, Omega kind of wins, I think,
Now.
Yeah.
But but I'm pretty sure that Rolex came out with the Milgauss first.
They did.
Which was intended for scientists that work around big electromagnetic fields, which was, I think, like 1,000 or like 1,500 Gauss at the time.
Right.
Wasn't until the recent coaxial movements that the Railmaster pushed that aside.
Right.
They came out with, like I said, the first waterproof watch. Whenever Rolex does new technology, they do it in a way that I believe that is industry leading. It's not so much about coming out with new technology, it's coming out with a better version of the technology. So, whenever they implemented the silicone hairspring, they came out with their own formula to make the silicone for the hairspring.
Right.
Whenever they come out with a ceramic bezel, they literally invented a way to
they patented some creative name for it too.
Yeah, well, not just that, but I mean, it's like they come up with their own version of it. It's not like, oh, we're going to buy the technology to be able to put this in our watches. We're going to make the technology to be able to put this in our watches, because they don't just like put it in their watches and it's like, all right, now our watches have it. No, it's like, we're going to test it for like 5 years before we even release it to the public.
So what you're saying is they're late to the party?
No, I'm saying that they take measured steps.
Gotcha. I guess that makes sense.
Yeah.
It is a very calculated risk to implement new technology, make sure that when it goes into the watches, you don't have any recalls. I don't think it's even about
calculated risk. I believe that it's like literally it's measured steps into like, yeah, the market in 5 years is going to have a ceramic bezel, but let's start inventing a technology now that's going to make the ceramic A lot better than the competitors. And then B, we have the ability to make our own instead of relying on somebody else.
Right. And Rolex also has their own additional certificate, beyond the cost
for their superlative chronometer.
Right.
Yes, it's a lot more accurate.
Right.
Going out of the factory, and over time, yes. Now they don't test it in as many ways as Metas does. I think Metas tests it in like heat, cold, and like upside down, and like literally like a child banging against a toy or something.
Got like a plastic hammer.
Literally.
See if it keeps time during all that.
Yeah, versus Rolex. I mean, it's literally tested in the environment.
Right.
So,
yeah. So I think the other thing that I like about the Omega is just like Rolex, love and death, phenomenal product. They make extremely accurate pieces, but with Omega you get a little bit more of the artisanship to it. Every movement,
now,
the movement, they're all decorated. Well,
now,
but they're all decorated movements, and like they give you the exhibition case back to be able to see that as well.
They don't put.
It ain't quite as pretty. It ain't quite as pretty. It's pretty, but it ain't quite as pretty as the Omega.
If that's half the selling point for getting these watches, then
I think it is. That's why they put this exhibition case back on it.
Okay, that's for them. I mean, but if that's half their selling point, then that's, I don't know.
It's just meticulous. It's just very meticulous. That's one of the reasons I like them, because they're so meticulous.
They're not
very
Patek,
exhaustive.
they're not AP. Come on.
No, but I think
why would you put an exhibition case back on a dive watch?
Well, the great thing about that,
that's another seal that can pop off.
You're
Rolex
right,
is smart, and they don't.
And it still claims 300 meters of water resistance. I'm just saying.
Okay, who came out with the first dive watch that was 300 meters of water resistant?
What?
As far as our two brands, who
Well, that was the Rolex came out with the first water resistant, so to speak. The first dive watch was actually given to Omega, of course, with the Marine.
Well, first water resistant watch,
Right.
yes. I'm talking about 300 meters.
Oh, 300 meters, that's Rolex.
Yeah.
Okay. But still the first dive watch. First one to 300 meters. But yeah. What about significant pieces? So like, we kind of we've talked about the history. Of course, we're looking at, we've chosen these watches. Obviously, we're not talking about the pieces too thoroughly in this case. The Daytona versus the Speedmaster, and then of course the Submariner versus the Seamaster. Both, all four of them are very iconic in the industry. What are the significance of these pieces, and like how do they compare next to each other?
Rolex Submariner is the Rolex Submariner, and it's pretty much been an icon since it was invented. The Daytona is an iconic racing watch.
It's the Rolex Daytona.
It's the Rolex Daytona, and it was worn by many influential people like Paul Newman.
Right. Oh, now you're name dropping.
Well, I've already used James Bond.
Well, true.
Which you're trying to win against.
Right. Well, we got Pierce Brosnan for the Omega, but
Well, it's Daniel Craig
then,
now.
Well, then of course we also iconic in terms of significant pieces. Of course, the Speedmaster Moonwatch. Of course, the first watch on the moon. That was no big deal, right? So there's that. But there's other. I mean, I think there's something to be said in terms of like each brand kind of goes back and forth with a lot of the watches that they have. Of course, I think these are comparable, almost laterally, in terms of what they offer. And you've got the deep sea versus the planet ocean, things like that. Like
it's
for
deep sea versus the Ploprof, I think,
right.
Especially like the James Cameron and the new like releases. Yeah,
True.
But
in terms of depth,
that's another thing too. That like Omega hasn't done a deep dive. Rolex
Who needs to go down that low?
We don't know anything about the ocean.
We know a little bit. When James Cameron went,
we know more about the moon than we do about the ocean. Okay,
that's true.
James Cameron, with his thing with the deep sea, went down that far.
Right.
Because Omega is too scared.
Right.
They want to go to space. We want to go.
I'd rather go to space anyway. A lot less stuff trying to kill me. All right. So let's go with attainability. So like I think we got two counter arguments. One is investment. One is attainability, and I think one lends itself towards the other one, and then the other one lends itself towards the other. So we'll go with attainability first because I think both of them are great investment pieces. But I think it warrants saying that Omega is a much more obtainable watch, generally speaking. And there's a number of different reasons for that. We could make a whole video into why there's a shortage of Rolex and why it's difficult to get them and why you can get Omega versus the other one. But I think the obtainability portion of it, just both in price point, even with a brand new, you're looking at something straight from the authorized dealer. Omega has a lower price point, easier to get if you're kind of walking into the industry, not necessarily familiar with it. Of course, in the pre-owned market, like when you're getting it from SwissWatchExpo, something even less than retail, and then of course will grow in investment over time. So I think Omega is definitely the more obtainable piece, unless you're kind of looking at the date just line when it comes to the Rolex. But of course, there's the obvious counter argument, which is the investment component.
So, what about ROI?
I mean, Rolex over investment.
Exactly.
Return on investment.
I mean, it literally. You're going to talk about investment. I mean, ROI, the rate of investment value over time. Rolex wins this argument bar none. We should just close up shop and.
Well, for that argument, I agree.
Attainability, yes, but that's partially because of Rolex just doing whatever it wants in the market, because Rolex is an anomaly in the watch market, and that's another thing that makes it cool is that it's mysterious. They don't tell anybody anything. They never have. Right. They're not even technically a business. They're a non-for-profit.
Right. And they're actually one of the biggest donators of charity in the world too. So that's actually that definitely gives them a big old check mark. I heard someone suggest that I think, in my opinion, both make phenomenal products. In my opinion, I believe Omega makes a better watch, but I believe Rolex is a better brand simply because Rolex can market their stuff extremely well. Obviously, the secondary market on a Rolex is higher than the primary market.
Are you talking about like the whole thing that Rolex is like a marketing brand?
Yeah, they're marketing brand first, watchmaker second.
No, I don't believe that for a second. So I'm going to clear the air real quick. The whole thing, what I said about Rolex testing the watches in the environment, and like that's not marketing. Right. Marketing is the after effect of we took this watch down to blah 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 blah. No, they're like, hey, we're building a watch to go 1,000 meters. Watch this cool documentary on how we do it. And then literally we do it. Right. And, the first watch to go to Everest. Yeah, they marketed it afterwards, but it went to Everest. They didn't market it that it was going to go to Everest. They marketed it afterwards. Our watch went to Everest. Right. And came back down.
That'd be a shame if they started marketing. It's going to be the first watch to make it to Everest, and then it doesn't go there.
Exactly. So that would be a marketing thing to me. And so, like, it's not a marketing gimmick. It's literally the watches are poised to survive the situation that they're supposed to be intended for.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the whole thing, the whole point of
Right.
Rolex. And I think people get that confused with marketing, and it's not.
I mean, I can definitely contest that, like I think Omega makes a better product, more accurate watch now, but I can contest that, like from the 80s, 90s, and probably up to the early 2000s, Rolex kind of really didn't have a lot of competition in the precision world to me, from my personal experience and, seeing watches come in and out of service and things. They just managed to keep time extremely well. I can't tell you how many times we'd see Rolexes come in that lasted 20 years without needing a service.
Yeah.
And of course, now Omega will make the claim you don't need to do it within 5 years. You can make it go 8, 10 years, that sort of stuff. But back in the day, I don't think there was really a contender in the overall precision in the ability for timekeeping that Rolex had. Now I think Omega is a true contender, and they really do go head to head, in my opinion. I think, it's really just a preference thing in terms of which watch you like, but I think they're both pretty amazing.
Yeah, they have some pluses and minuses, sure. But I just, like, you hold a Rolex and you hold an Omega, like, say the Samir, like the current generations together. It's just like watch for watch. Well, this is not a current, 2020
This is
plus
pretty
release.
solid.
But I mean, like, I'm not saying that they're not solid. It's just the materials used. I mean, like, they came out with their own version of 904L steel that's more corrosion resistance. The ceramic, I think, is just better done versus, Omega literally uses ceramic too, but it's like generic.
Well, they didn't bring, they may not have invented it, but I mean,
I do like their
certainly
clasps,
Right.
sure, but Rolex came out with the glide lock system before Omega did.
Which is outstanding. I do agree with that.
Yeah. And it's just, I just can't see the quality. I mean, white gold and all their watches versus steel.
Well, I mean, I guess there's that component of it because Omega doesn't really do that very often unless it is a two-tone watch. But I think that's a different argument altogether. But yeah, you're right about that.
Now, I will say that Omega has kept the whole thing of being a true tool watch type brand versus Rolex has kind of slowly pivoted away from that with most of their pieces, especially with the glossiness of the Explorer now being two-tone and the Sea Dweller being two-tone.
Yeah.
It's gotten away from that.
Right.
The Explorer 2, still a tool watch to me.
Right.
Omega, still a tool watch brand because,
Yes.
that they're not glossing up their pieces. They're not throwing very many two-tone pieces in there with the intention of it being a tool watch.
Right. I agree with you on that completely. I'll thank you for making the argument for me.
That's one argument.
That's just one argument. Okay. Well, I think we've been pretty exhaustive about this. Obviously, you guys have some opinions as well. What do you think wins? We obviously know that everybody knows and loves Omega. I mean, we know that they love Rolex. We also know that people love Omega. But what's your favorite? Let us know in the comments. Like, comment, subscribe, and all that jazz. And we'll catch you next time on Taking Time.